Hi there, welcome back. Right, today, as you can see, we are going to fit some YSS suspension on the Harley Softail. Now, I bought this bike about 6 months ago, I've been riding it around a lot, and I found one thing that's very typical of Softails is it tends to get itself in a bit of a knot and slam over successive bumps. These bikes have got an incredible handling characteristic which I love them for, and that is their long sweeping bend ability, in the sense that they will sit stable and absolutely planted in bends as long as they're smooth. If they've got bumps and undulations in them, they tend to get in a bit of a weave, and the reason for that is there's no suspension travel to speak of. The Harley Softail is, as we all know, a fake hardtail. They give you this hardtail styly frame, but they hide two shock absorbers up underneath that do a bit of movement, and that is just the problem. They only do a bit of movement. The suspension travel in a Softail is probably an inch and a half at the most, and that just isn't enough to give smooth, comfortable, compliant suspension. It just makes them a little bit harsh, and that means therefore that if you've got short travel suspension, as everybody knows, it must be very good quality suspension. And again, as everybody knows also, the factory suspension is never good quality, really, is it? It's only ever a cooking version, it's never really a la carte. So we looked at the market and we found one thing that's a little bit of a shame: there isn't much in the way of options for your Harley Softail. Diners, any bike with twin shocks, monoshocks for sports bikes, oh my goodness, the market is absolutely colossal. There are just hundreds of options, and that's great for you. But if you've got a Harley Softail, you really are limited. There is one or two companies that make suspension, and that's it. And what I was really pleased to find out is that one of them is YSS. Now, YSS make the shocks that we just put on Penny's Triumph, which, as she reports after a few rides, how are they getting on? Are they good?
Absolutely superb.
Really? Good?
Doesn't wallow in bends.
Lovely.
Amazing. Love them.
That's it. I think when you put really good quality suspension on a bike, it is expensive. It's always expensive, but my goodness, it's well worth it. When you do it yourself on your bike, you'll realise it's worth the money. It transforms the handling of the bike. And why do you own the bike? You own it to enjoy. So why not spend some money on it so you can enjoy it a little bit more? And that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to stick these shocks on. We did actually a little research as well, didn't we?
Yes.
We always do some research on YouTube before we make a video, because what we don't like to do, firstly, is copy anybody else, because it's disrespectful. We don't do that. Secondly, we want to do something that's not been covered, if possible. And these days on YouTube, most things have been covered, and we therefore try to cover it in a slightly different way, a different angle. Those of you who watch our channel, you know that about us. So we tried today, and we found a really surprising thing. There are lots of videos on how to adjust the preload on the suspension of your Softail, but virtually none on how to actually fit a set of shocks. There really isn't. There are some out there. If you look, you probably Google them already. There are a few, but really they're not up to much. They're done a long time ago, so I thought we'd do that today, show you how they fit on. There's only 4 bolts. It's pretty straightforward, but the biggest issue is this, and
Yes.
it's this big old girl here. They're 350 kilos or so when they're all fully loaded. That is an awful lot of weight to have up in the air. When you get one of these things up on a bench, you know it's there. You really do. I mean, it wobbles. It's very scary, because you know if that comes down on you, you're going to have a bad day, really, aren't you? So I've double strapped it at the front, as you can see. 2 straps on the front of each side, because we're going to jack up in the middle, and we're going to use those as a pivot, and we're going to get the back of the bike in the air. Now, we're only doing that so you can watch us do it. Really and honestly, if I was doing this myself, you do it on the ground, on the side stand, you get a little jack, a trolley jack under the right hand side of the frame, and you just jack the bike up onto its side stand. And then you can lay down on the ground, and you can get underneath it, and you can change those shocks. It's not difficult at all. You don't have to have it up in the air. That's just because what we're doing. That's right. Let's show you quickly first what they look like. These 2 fasteners under here, they're the front of the shocks. These are the 2 shocks here, and they just bolt through this chassis mount. Simple cross member there, come out the other side. They've got rubber bushings in there. You just have to undo these 2 bolts first of all. Right, now the reason it's all skanky and oily under here is not because there's a leak or anything, it's just that last night I sprayed a load of WD-40 or Freon oil all over these bolts to give them a chance to soak, so they do come off. They're not likely to rust on there, but it's a sort of common sense thing you do. If you're taking an exhaust off your car, for instance, you soak everything in Freon oil the night before, so hopefully the next day I have a chance of getting them off. And you do exactly the same thing with suspension bolts, because they live in a very hostile environment under there, rust and salt and all sorts, as you can see with the state of them. It's good to give them a chance of coming off without being broken. The next thing is to move the jack table forward to get to the other bolts, because they're underneath here, they're about there. So, just a block under the frame there, something strong enough to support it. That block's now supporting the weight of the bike. I can pop this right in front. Okay, this end of the shocks has got an eyelet on and it's held in sideways. It's got a big bush across here, a big mount, and these bolts bolt in sideways from either side through pretty standard rubber bushing. So all you need to do now is take those two big fat 19mm bolts off. Well, there we are. They are a seriously cruddy old thing. Look at that.
Let's have a look.
2005 bike. So that is the salt corrosion you get from whatever it is, 12 years of use, 30,000 miles. Here we go. Right, the next thing is to take all of the parts we're going to recycle, all the bits we're going to use again, and clean them up, because there's no use trying to use them. Things like these mounting bolts, that has got like a rubber corrosion all stuck to it. They didn't use any rubber lube around it. It goes inside a bush which has got a rubber lining in it, so all of that consideration will be done. These are absolutely lovely condition, they're fine. They're stainless. Yeah, they're low grade stainless, so they will clean up beautifully, don't need to get new ones. Torque setting on these is absolutely outrageous. It's up there around, I think it's 115 foot-pounds, I think, pounds-feet, 115 pounds-feet, I think it is really, really high, but you can't get a torque wrench in there. All you've got is about that much above the bolt. So unless you've got a very specialised torque wrench, that kind of torque wrench, then you're not going to be able to torque them up. So just do them up with a spanner, FT, that's the torque setting. Right, there we are, let's do some cleaning. Okay, now once you've got everything cleaned up, you've got these mount bushes all clean and looking lovely. You can buy new ones of these, and some of the kits you get, some of the shocks you buy come with these as a new part, but there's really no need. They're made of stainless steel, a low-grade stainless steel that corrodes. As you saw, the wire brush cleaned them up absolutely lovely. The rubber bushings in this are absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with them at all. Had there been, then I would have replaced them with new ones. So if yours are, if they're a bit squished, get some new ones that don't cost a great deal from Harley, but they are like perfect. So no need to. Right. When we look at the shocks themselves, they are height adjustable. Many of the kits you see that lower the ride height of your Softail, they bolt onto the business end here of the shock and they give you a thread that you can adjust. And what that adjusts is this particular position. And that's how they make the shock longer or shorter. Let's show you on the bench. This is your standard factory shock, and that's the two mount points, one there and one there. That mounts through the frame outrigger, and that has got a bolt that holds it to the rear of the swing arm. So those 2 points. Now if you lengthen that, then effectively you lower the bike. Making the shock longer takes into over here, pen. This is the triangular swing arm on this. It's a very different design to most of the bikes out there. This is the pivot point, and the shock's right down here. So if you make the shock longer, you push this bottom part of the swing arm outwards, which pushes the axle upwards, which there lowers the bike. So if you make these longer, you lower the bike. If you make them shorter, then you raise the bike up. Simple as that. So that's how they work. And the way that YSS have designed their shocks is to give you an adjustability here. It's extremely simple. I absolutely love the way it works. You get these 5 little steel rings on the shock when you undo it from the box. They're made of stainless, they're not just washers, they're proper little stainless steel precision rings. And you pop them on, like that, however many you might need, and then you put the bush on. As you can see straight away, that's lined up that end, that's too long. So I take the bush off again, take one of them out. Now that's the same height. Now my bike, personally, I want my bike to be the same ride height as it was before I started. I don't want to lower it, and I certainly don't want to raise it up. So I'm going to put that in exactly the correct place. If you want to lower your bike, all you need to do is to make that a little bit longer, is instead of fitting as I've done, one on the back there, then you just fit another one and pop that on. That will lower the bike by probably, I don't know, I'm guessing about ½ an inch or so, and you've got all these rings. You can keep going, but as long as you've got sufficient thread showing to get the nut on, you can bring it to wherever you like. You can absolutely slam it. And that to me is the simplest way of adjusting the ride height on a Harley that I've ever come across. The kits do the same thing. They just give you a thread you can turn, so it moves the point at where that mounts. But this, honestly, I don't think I've seen it as simple and as obvious as that in all my time, and that really, really appeals to me. So all I've got to do on this, as I want to do with mine, is I want it the same as the factory ride height. You've got the main clear shaft, which you need. You obviously wouldn't have the bush over the threads at all, so I'm going to put one on, which, as you can see there, gives me the same ride height. So they're going to be exactly. We'll talk about the preload in a minute. That's nothing to do with it. This is the ride height of the shock, so that's the same as the factory shock. And because I've got this bare shaft showing, I now need to cover that up, because the nut is going to go on. If I put the nut on there now, it's going to rattle around. That's no good. So we pop the remaining collars in place to pack up to the nut. There's a little tiny bit still showing, so just one more, and then make sure that what's left, the thread sticking out, is enough so that a bit of it pokes out the top of the nut, giving you a full nut as it's known. Now that is ready to fit to the bike. That's the setup for them. 1 on the inside, 3 on the outside. Now the reason for this, quite simply, is that if you go on the YSS website or on Wimoto, you'll find that this particular shock is one model, and it fits every Softail that they've got listed, and they've listed about 30. So right from about 1998, 99, when the Softails started to get popular, right through to today, that's more or less the same design of shock. And when you fit one of these, obviously there are going to be discrepancies in the manufacturing setup. So however your particular Softail might be, just use your factory shock as a guide. Simply fit the bush back on and then match it to that if you want the same ride height. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So you are getting effectively a universal shock in that sense. Universal always makes it sound like it's not good, but in this instance, universal simply means that you've got many spaces and you have options on where you can put the ride height, rather than being specifically made for your bike and your model. It's the way they managed to do them for a price. Right, let's put it on the bike. these rubbers that rub against the cross member, I'm just putting some red rubber grease on there for common sense, because they rub against the cross member, which means if you've got the rubber grease lubricant on there, they just won't wear, so the bushes themselves will last longer. Just a little dab of the finger, run it round like that, and that's the bearing face of the rubber that will touch against the frame. And the same goes for these. Again, just a little blob, just run it round that outside edge where it's going to touch against the frame. You're just preparing everything properly. This is the kind of thing that will make a good job instead of an average job, because when you then come to do something to your bike later, it all comes apart, everything's healthy, and it's all easy to re-put back together. There we go. The next thing is going to be at the top end, we have to put these bearing bolts through. That piece of shaft rubs against the inside of this bushing, so I'm going to put a little bit of copper slip just on that. This is kind of twofold. First of all, it assists it moving and sliding into its position, so it's great for assembly, and also it stops it corroding in there. It'll stop anything. You saw the corrosion that was on these when I first took them out. Well, that nice little layer of copper slip will stop that happening next time. You've also got, although that's a big, that metal shaft is probably about 12 mil, 14 mil thick. The bolt's only 19, so effectively that's quite a small bolt head as well. Very specialised bolt. So pop that through there. Going to go that way, and that's quite a snug fit. Just slips through. There we go. Not on the thread, because we need to thread lock that so it doesn't come out. All suspension fasteners should have a dab of thread lock on them. And there we are. They're ready to fit on the bike. Okay, now obviously when you line up any set of shocks, when you're putting them on, having the swing arm at the exact height so that the bolts line up is quite important. But the great thing with Softail shocks is that just goes straight in, so it doesn't matter whether they're exactly lined up. You just push that in, and then later on when you put the nut on, you then take the weight off the back wheel, let the wheel hang on its swing arm, and that will push that firmly in to get the nut done up. So it's really easy to fit these. All we do, first of all, is going to lay it down there. A little bit of blue Loctite or thread lock, just removable thread lock. Just going to put that there on the thread on the end. I said this in the past, always make sure, if you can, always make sure you thread lock the mount bolts for your suspension, because they take a lot of manipulation. The constant pounding up and down as the bike goes along, that's pushing on that thread all the time. Some of the shocks, certainly on dyno style bikes, they do this as the swing arm moves up and down in an arc. The shock is doing that very slightly. Only talking a millimetre or two, but that means that the bolt at the end is doing that very slightly, and over time that can unwind it. So a little bit of thread lock always. So we pop the back end in first, all the way in, and then line up in the top there. Use the jack, oops, to bring that into line, so the bolt just drops straight in. There we are. That's it. With a block under the back tyre, you line it up absolutely perfectly. Let's do the bolt up. Right, I'll show you something with these bolts and talk about the torque setting on them. Just a sec, get the other one, I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so just want to show you on these, if I take this bolt out, the torque setting on this bolt is massive. It's over 100, as you saw. And the way it works is when you wind that into the swing arm pivot, there's a pivot underneath there. It's solid steel, and it's actually got a lined thread. The casting that they make this from, the metal casting, they don't cut the thread into the casting. Harley are very clever. What they've done instead is actually inserted a stainless steel thread into the casting. They've drilled the casting out and then put a thread into that, so it's a lot stronger, because threading into cast metal is a little bit dodgy because cast metal's brittle. So effectively, you've got a really, really robust thread. That's a 12mm M12 coarse, so that's a heck of a thread. You can lean on that, monkey boy, you really can. But it says over that 100 pounds-feet torque setting, it's really to make sure it doesn't come out. It's not to squeeze or compress it. So I want to make the distinction. You're not compressing anything here that's important. When you tighten down cylinder heads, it's important that the torque setting is specific because it torques it down. It squeezes it down to an exact amount. But these bolts are shouldered. What you've got there is a shaft and then the thread on the end. So that threads in, and once that shaft locks up against the frame, that's it. You can swing on that with a 12-foot bar. It won't go any further. It won't move. It will just snap off in the end. So there's no need to worry too much about not being able to get in there with a torque wrench and putting a proper torque on it, because it will worry some of you. I know, we get these questions all the time. So put the copper slit on the end, pop it through there, which then means that that will move and flex as it needs to. Also, the copper slit will prevent the corrosion building up inside there on the metal bush that will then cause it to seize in there later. And then we put, like we did just now, lots of thread lock on the end of here. Let that just move around the thread. Gravity will take it round. You can put quite a bit on, it doesn't really do any harm. There we go. Plenty of thread lock on that. And that acts as a lubricant on its way in. So just pop that one back up. You see this one?
This time we're gonna get funky.
That's about as good as it gets. There we go. Here we are. That's done up Harley tight.
This time we're gonna get funky.
Okay, let's show you how to adjust the preload on your Softail shocks. You probably know how to do it already, but I'll just give you a quick run through in case. I'm not going to do it to the shocks on the bike because they're just as they are, they're factory set. There's no reason to change them because I don't know yet whether they're right, wrong or otherwise. I'm going to leave them, ride them and see what they're like, and then after a little while, once they've settled down and started moving in a supple way, then I'll make a little adjustment if I need to. So I'm going to leave those alone rather than using those as a demonstration. I'll leave them as they are for now, and I'll show you this on one of the old factory shocks how to adjust the preload. It's really simple, but you do need a special tool. I'll show you. Right, you've got the spring inside and this platform around the outside, this big disc with the 4 holes in, that's about 6mm thick solid steel, and that actually holds the spring on the inside, stops it pinging out. And the way that this adjusts is by screwing inwards, because it's threaded in the center, and this is the thread upon which it sits right there. As you can see, there's a big lock nut in place to stop it moving. So we back off the lock nut by holding those 2 flats. You can see them, Pen. The 2 flat bits there on the side of the shaft, just to use there to hold it still with the spanner. Once we back that off, we can then turn this and use a special tool for it. I'll show you. There we go. Just break the lock nut. There we go. So back off the lock nut all the way out the way, so it's out of harm's way. Can you come in close, man? I want to show the folks this. Look, you can probably see closely in there that the thread goes on in, and this plate is threaded on the inside, and that thread and that plate are what turn against each other. Now you need a special tool for this. This is the Harley one, piece of stamped out steel. Obviously there are better quality ones. If you go and buy one from your main dealer, you get posh ones, quite smart looking like that. Just poke it in the vise, make it look like it's on the bike. So this is the best way you can see it. Can you come in a bit closer? Now, once you've got this lock nut backed off out the way, that then lets this plate move. We still have to hold the shaft still. So take your 916, that holds the shaft in the middle still. Then you take your special tool, you put it in the 2 holes and you turn it. That's it. That's as simple as that. As you turn it outwards, you release the pressure on the spring. As you turn it inwards, you tighten it up. It's as simple as that. There we go. If you're going to do this on your bike, do both shocks exactly the same and do it in small increments. Any suspension adjustment, whether it's damping, compression, rebound or preload, you should always do in small increments, just a couple of turns and then take it out for a ride. Come back, couple more turns and you're normally fine. You get it done real quick. There we are. So that's how you adjust the suspension preload, the spring preload on a Softail shock. And it doesn't matter what Softail shock it is, that's the standard factory one. And that's how it works exactly the same on the YSS one as well. Just back off the lock nut, hold the shaft still with an open end and then just turn the collar. Simple. Now just pop a little bit of marker, a bit of nail varnish or something on the bolt heads, make sure they don't move. Keep an eye on them for the next couple of weeks. They won't move. You put thread lock on the back, you've got nylock knots on the front, so it shouldn't be an issue. They should not move, but just to know that they won't is a nice bit of peace of mind. That's all we're going to put into the Softail for now. I don't think it needs any more. Certainly not going to put any modifications in it for now, but the YSS shocks, in my personal opinion, are a great upgrade, purely because all Softails, their shocks are their weakest link. They're an Achilles heel, and hopefully we've invested in that. I'll be dealing with the preload as I need to as time goes on, very much like Penny is with the damping on her shocks. So we'll get it right over time. But for now, that is it on modification and upgrading the bikes for the new season. Next video, we are back on the Kawasaki Fighter build. So some fabrication, some laminating, going to get the Kevlar out, do some fun stuff, and I'm sure there's loads of you waiting for that. That's it, Pen.
See you next time.
See you next time. Take it easy, ride safe. Everyone.